Hello and welcome to Wehry Dads. I'm your host, PJ Wehry, with my
co-host. Yeah, and that's Dad. And our
sponsor.
Yeah, is Windshape Retreat, because that's the pad of paper I'm using. They do a great job in supporting nations of coaches. It's a ministry I work with, doing events for us, and they aren't our sponsor, but if they would be, it would be a game changer. And I want to give them a shout out. And so it's borderline kind of a blue sky, support us, Windshape, Chick-fil-A Foundation, but that's just probably not going to happen. But I want to give them a shout out because they do such a good job.
I have a sponsor.
Oh, who's your sponsor?
Lake Meadow Naturals.
And what are those?
That's a farm about 20 minutes from here. And I just finished rendering out about 4 or 5 pounds of pork back fat, which it's buy one, get one free. They often do great deals like that. And so
that sounds pork back fat.
It's fat from the back of a pig. And let me tell you, it makes you render that out and then you let it cool down.
Yes.
Don't stick your hand in the hot fat. That's like, yeah. But if you mix that in after it's cooled down, you can roll it into some dough. Makes some of the best tortillas of your life.
I had no idea about this.
That's lard in flour. It's a good day.
Just doesn't sound healthy. Lard in flour.
It's big farm talking to you, Dad.
Okay.
So today we're talking about change in marriage, but maybe we should be talking about...
No. Let's talk about marriage. I know a lot more about that, although I do feel like I know something about lard. All right. So we're talking about big changes in life, and we talked about other changes so far leading up to this, and this one is dealing with marriage. And we're going to talk about how marriage is a huge step and then a huge privilege and a huge opportunity. And with it, it brings multiple areas of change. I think for me, and I want to start off with this, and the marriage continued a process of understanding how selfish I was. I thought I knew I was selfish, and I think that for me really opened up, my eyes were opened up for me when I went to college, had roommates. That began a process of me understanding that I had set ways of what I thought you should do things and so forth. But boy, when you get married, things pop out that reveal, like, no, this is the way you do it. This is how I've done it. Like, what are you doing? And how my way may not always be best. I'll give you the first illustration of it. I'll never forget coming home and looking. I was getting ready to make coffee, and I couldn't find coffee in the house. Do you know this?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly where you're going. I've heard there's a set of stories all similar to each other, because it is Florida versus New England.
Yeah. And so your mom, I couldn't find the coffee, man. We're living in Connecticut. I want to make coffee and I can't find it. And she comes home and I said, I want to make some coffee. She goes, well, it's in the freezer. And I said, why? Well, you keep it in the freezer in Florida so it keeps it fresh, which we don't do anymore. So maybe that was a fictitious statement in
ground versus whole bean.
Oh, but ours is ground now because it's in a little cup.
Yeah, but that cup is sealed.
Oh.
There you go.
Seal. A new seal. Seal. Dun, 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 dun.
I don't know where you go.
Do you know that song? No. And nobody that's listening know that song too, either, because I just did it so wrong. All right. Oh, that's Sail. Sail. All right. And then the second one was I went to get bread, and we have a bread box in the house. I'm not here to make fun of my wife, although let's just be honest, that's what's happening right here. So I went to what I thought would be the place to go, the bread box. And there's no bread in there. And
lo and behold.
Yeah, loaf and behold. And then I looked, and it was in the fridge. And all I will say to this is, you're saying, how's this got to deal with? Just because I had to make changes. I realized I thought this is the way things should be done. And that was minute to other areas that were revealed of selfishness.
You know, it's crazy, even as I'm listening to this, that you know what else has changed over time? Because literally she learned her habits from people who grew up in the 50s through 70s in Florida.
Yes.
The AC is better now. That's actually like a legit thing.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that makes like...
Now that is I'm doing a gratitude list. And if there's anything for those that know PJ and I, that we have good AC in our home, we give glory.
That was the first big population boom to Florida. Nobody lived in Florida, really. It grew like exponentially in the 50s with the invention of air conditioning, which makes a lot of sense.
I would not be here without air conditioning. I can promise you that. It's hard enough sometimes for me to be here with air conditioning, because right now, honestly, folks, I'm hitting my phone. Not just hitting it like I'm having a temper tantrum, but I am looking at weather. And this is crazy. It is raining out hard, and it is September 13th. It is 79 degrees out. And somebody say, well, that's not bad. Real feel 85.
Yeah, mine says 81.
Yeah, well, your phone's probably better.
It's Samsung, right? Like Apple fam got to stick together.
Okay. Tomorrow, 87. Thursday, 87. Friday, 86. For those of you that live in this area listening to this podcast, first of all, thank you. Thank you for listening. But second of all, you get it. Like there are people right now in Connecticut where I grew up, they're like, oh man, I can't wait.
I swear we're not padding for time, by the way. The point about...
Oh, we're padding.
The point about this is when you are... I just thought that was interesting about why these things happen, right?
It's like me teaching all of a sudden. I've just gone a veer to left.
Full. But I think there's an important point, and I had a point with talking about the AC wasn't as good. So her family grew up... You would literally end up with like mold on bread if you didn't put it. If you put it on
I knew that's where you're going. I think people knew, but go ahead.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. But the point is that even in Florida, the culture has changed because the necessity has changed because of like technology and stuff. But one of the things you're going to see, and I think this is just the truth about marriage. 150 years ago, you had a pool of probably about 100 people to choose from to get married. It's significantly bigger now. I mean, imagine with internet dating. But part of that is we have a huge clash of cultures. I'm shaking my head
because that's odd for me, but acceptable.
Yeah, there's thousands of people you're picking from, right? I mean, maybe like I don't know what the calculation is. I know it's a lot with internet dating. But one of the things that comes up is you're always going to be navigating huge clash of cultures, even within, And so when we talk about change in marriage, people are navigating change in their lives, change in our society at a rapid pace. Like, what are manners and what is polite and what is okay on social media? Even that has changed multiple times in the last 10 years. Like, what is it okay to say? You know, when people first started, and then what is okay right now? And it's definitely played a role in traditional media. It's played a role in the home. Like, I remember...
In traditional marriages then.
When I remember, and this is, so as we talk about change, when we talk about habits that we bring into our marriage, and I remember when cell phones first came out, it was incredibly rude. Like, people would comment directly to your face if you were on your phone
during dinner.
During dinner.
Oh, no question.
And now it's become ubiquitous. And so these are things, as we talk about change in your marriage and we talk about the selfishness that comes up, you're going to see a lot of habits that just come in and creep in because of the technology or because of the culture. And what's really important is that you communicate about these things and you make decisions based on truth and the values that proceed from that truth. So, like, is it okay to have your phones out during lunch? It's not necessarily a bad thing, but I would definitely say talk through things with your spouse and say, okay, lunch, you can have your phones out. Dinner, we put phones away. We have them not within arm's reach.
So this wasn't even like on my radar, but this is really good points. You know what they do with like a lot of teams? When players come to the dinner, they have a box. And they walk in, they got to put it in there.
Teachers do that with and it's just become a thing. Like, if you need attention, like if you're having a family meeting, put the phones away, right? And just being explicit about that and negotiating that, because they aren't traditional, right? There is no tradition. There is no set of manners that governs this.
So I had for it'll open your eyes to selfishness. The second one is obstacles, and technology provides that. It's an obstacle. There are other obstacles that'll come up in marriage. Okay, differences of.
We've talked about phones, but the same thing with the bread, right? Like, okay, it's not. I
don't use my phone for bread.
That's fair. That's fair.
No,
I'm
it's
talking about. There's all sorts of manners that aren't set in stone that you're going to have to negotiate. And this is where manners don't seem to matter, and people who are really strict about manners in our society are kind of seen as weird. And it's not a big deal until you don't have it. It's kind of like people who are like overly concerned with like cleaning the house, and you're like, chill, relax. And then you like, if you have people who don't, the only thing worse than someone who worries too much about cleaning is someone who doesn't worry about cleaning at all. And I know you have some too, some horror stories about working with a guy's dorm, some of the stuff that happened with that.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're
made me very grateful for marriage when I would walk into the guys' dorms in college.
So you're going to have different obstacles. So whether, we hit phones and we talked about social media, like, do we praise our spouse on social media? Are we allowed to complain about our spouse on social media?
Never. But that's if you want to live.
If you want to talk about selfishness, this is like, well, it's just, it's just a way to like vent, and it's like
so unbiblical.
Right. And so anyways, you had a couple other points.
I don't want to say you digress. You definitely took us to a direction that is a really good one. And I think it's part of the obstacles that young couples will face as they get married. But there's so many good opportunities. And for me, there's not a question in my mind that, we've been married 37 years, and there's this power of friendship that has been not only developed, but it's been cultivated. When you navigate stuff together, it just builds such a strong bond. And I hope my wife knows that I feel this way, because it's just a deep friendship. And then there's a second thing, is that we're together. We're together in something. There's this not only personal but corporate team like love. And, the truth is, there's nothing greater for my wife to feel like she can lean on me, because I know it's got to be powerful because I lean on her. Yeah. And so the opportunities that of change, because at times before you're married, you might have friends and so forth, and you may have family, aka your parents, but there is this, even I would argue that leaving starts way earlier than getting married. When you talk about leave and cleave, you start to leave, earlier. There's independence,
right,
and necessity for that independence.
And I think when we talk about change in marriage, the main thing is, and I haven't read the whole book, and that to my shame, but Gary Thomas talking about not sacred marriage. Marriage is not about your happiness. Marriage is about making you holy. And marriage is one of the most powerful tools in your life for sanctification. You will constantly be required to think wisely, to think unselfishly, to think lovingly. And so part of the leave and cleave thing is that you will, when you get married, no matter what, and if you don't, then I think it's a problem, you will become a different person. And and whenever we're faced with these kind of momentous occasions, the question is, are we going to become a better person, or are we going to become a worse person?
Yeah. And I know your answer to that. I know my answer. I feel like I'm living proof that I've become a better man because of my wife. She has stretched my thinking, encouraged me. I just asked her the other day if she'd be more of my cheerleader, because we were going through so much. And I think that was a really strong conversation, because I was navigating some things that I felt like, man, I got to do a better job in this. Or people said, you do this well, but I sometimes have this creeping of doubt. And I said, I need you to believe in me. Boy, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big part. that opportunity is having, you talked about that teamwork aspect, facing change not only through your marriage, but as a married couple facing change. And there's a,
which we're really going to talk about in the next one. We talk about dealing with children.
yeah, but there is no replacement for having someone who is on your side.
I would agree. What do you think about, as we talk about change, having this opportunity to have somebody that you can be really open and vulnerable with? And some men out there say, I don't feel like I could do that with my wife. So I understand that. I mean, I've been mentoring a guy that, he feels like he's got to be careful because he doesn't want her to get fearful or afraid. But I think for me, I've been really open with your mom and transparent, and there's something about having somebody to have freedom to do that with. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Can you restate the beginning of the question, because I was listening to what you followed up with?
Just the privilege of having somebody to really be open and transparent with.
I mean, I think that is part of the reason it's the biggest instrument for our own growth and change, is because your spouse should be an instrument of truth, both experientially and expositorily, from an explanation, you know what I mean? Like that, right. Like there's like the very like propositional, like, hey, PJ, that was stupid, and I always appreciate those moments for my wife. And
she's
people
never.
I know, like, people actually, that's the kind of thing I would say. Becky Sue is much kinder than that.
Yeah.
But there's also, before I married Becky Sue, I have categories for this because I'd been reading Kierkegaard. But basically,
Shocker!
When you go through these stages of life, there are moments in life where we get faced, and there's no great translation for it, so the term is anxiety, but it's like this existential anxiety. Before I got married, I was like, I am entering literally a whole new mode of existence. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I think a lot of people feel this before they get married, like almost this huge wall, and you can't see past it, if that makes sense, because you have no idea. It's one of those moments where description does not save you, because there is no replacement for the experience of being married. Very similar, and I think there's something to be said, there's no experience, there's no replacement for being single for the entirety of your life. You know what I mean? And so what we talk about are these momentous occasions. That I've really had two of those moments in my life. One was when I got married. Let's say three. One was when I got married. One was when I had my first kid. And then one was right now before I had Frankie, because there was something different about it having a girl, and I had no idea what that felt like.
This leads into our next podcast, which you folks should listen to as we talk about
change, not parenting.
Change of marriage. And next time we'll be talking about. I said marriage, didn't I? You thought I said marriaging?
No, okay, I missed something.
Merging, when you get married.
Warning.
And you merge. Okay, change in marriage, and next time we're going to talk about change because of having children, parenting, and boy, that's got a lot of fun.
Thanks, Dan.
Love you, buddy.
Love you.